Webcast 23, I believe that we're up to, of the EGA Microdose Webcast. Oh, there I am again. Hey, bring me... Oh, jeez. That old thing again. We're up to number 23. Garden State's Microdose. Not so monthly anymore. Womanjeka, welcome to episode 23 of the Garden State's Microdose. I'm broadcasting from the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation this evening and would like to pay my respects to elders past and present. And also like to recognise that we benefit from the knowledge and insights of First Nations people here in Australia. My name is Nick Wallis, and I'm the co-founder of the Australian Psychedelic Society. I used to produce 3CR's program in psychedelia for 5 years until lockdown kicked me in the butt, as it did a lot of us. And I've spent the past, I was saying decade, but it's close to 15 years now, involved in one way or another in harm reduction here in Victoria. So thank you to all of those who are joining us this evening for the Microdose Webcast. These were created, as I said, during the rather extensive lockdowns in Victoria. And we've all been thrown back into our apparently busier than ever lives. Hence why there's fewer Microdose Webcasts, but there are some things coming up from EGA, and I'll get to those in a moment. As I said, we are live tonight, so thank you for joining us on the chat. Hello to everyone on the YouTube chat. You can use that comment section to drop in questions during tonight's presentation, and our EGA admin team will be having a look and curating those for us once we do get to a Q&A session a bit later on. Yeah, do drop in what Aboriginal country you are from. Thank you to those who have. Hello to Bundjalung land. Another one from Wurundjeri country. Wanarua land. And yeah, drop in any more that you are from. Welcome to everybody, and our respects to elders of all those lands across this nation and across the many nations that it once was. If you're watching this back later, do feel free to drop us a like there on the YouTube channel. That always helps us. And if you want to drop anything in the comment section, people will come back later and comment. This is a community, and we are a community able to answer each other's questions as well. Same goes for YouTube chat. You might see a question from somebody you might know the answer to already, or might have an idea on. So please keep that chat going. That's a really important part of what makes these events. EGA provide opportunities for critical thinking. Hey, let's bring up that EGA one. Critical thinking on knowledge and knowledge sharing on the meeting ground between plants, fungi, mind, and culture. EGA embrace the psychedelic in the broadest sense of this word that has been thrown around for many things over the past century, half a century, 60 years, 70 years. Yeah, it's getting close to a century now. Happy Wattle Day to everyone. 1st of September is officially Wattle Day. You'll have seen the golden blooms out everywhere across Victoria, and even smelted in the air. Beautiful smell. And EGA released some cool resources along the way for that day, and I'm going to bring those up for you. But the website entheogenesis.org /EGA-news/happy-wattle-day. Please, EGA admins, drop that into the comment section so you don't have to remember that, and you can just click. Tell me if we are indeed live again. Just I have some confidence there.
If you want some response from me, I can hear you, Nick.
You can. Excellent. Thank you, Graham. I think it should be live. It looks like it is. Yeah, my internet has been playing up. Hey, am I back? Yeah, hey, okay, all right. All right, I'm getting some feedback now. Yeah, I'm sorry about that. I blame, I'm going to blame goannas today. Not many goannas down here in Victoria, but the internet travels by cables. And let's just say those cables are it's chewed on by goannas. Sure, thanks, Nick. Sorry about that, everyone. Internet problems. I think I was up to telling you about Waddle Day. EGA-news- /happy-waddle-day. Two new resources. I'm going to move through these a little bit quicker. Two new resources. Those are a IDing guide for common waddle and a growing acacia from seed guide. You can find those on the EGA website. There is also a new acacia EGA t-shirt from IZWOZ. That's IZWOZ. IZWOZ.art is the website, and look in their collections for EGA fundraiser t-shirts. And thank you as well to our friends at IZWOZ for the next week. If you spend $100, you'll receive $20 off with the code FREE20. That's FREE, all in capitals, and the number 20. FREE20 at checkout. Stay up to date with everything EGA has to offer by signing up for the newsletter. Head to entheogenesis.org/connect to sign up there. And now to our presentation for this evening. We are focusing tonight on Terence McKenna, and Graham St. John will be leading that focus. Thank you as well to Kim Adams for the use of the fantastic artwork, Terence McKenna Visual Languaging Series #1. Ken Adams, Ken or Kim? I've got a Ken and a Kim in my notes here. Maybe Terence, maybe Graham can clear that up for us. So, Graham is let's start with Terence. Terence McKenna, cognitive libertarian and guerrilla ontologist, dedicated to transmitting the means of perception whereby growing numbers were encouraged to reclaim their minds and become authors of their own experience. That he is amongst the most influential and yet least understood of psychedelicists is a circumstance addressed in the forthcoming biography on Terence McKenna, The Strange Attractor, from MIT Press. With a focus on McKenna's relationship with DMT, this presentation draws on material from this coming book from Graham St. John and from his previous book, Mystery School in Hyperspace, A Cultural History of DMT, to discuss the circumstances by which he would grow to become America's shaman. The Raver's shamanarchist and eventually posthumous trip sitter for a global audience, Graham St. John. I think the bio might be starting here. Graham St. John, PhD, is a cultural anthropologist specializing in transformational events, movements, and figures. Graham has authored 10 books, including the forthcoming biography, Terence McKenna, The Strange Attractor, which will be available sometime in the next 12 months. But Graham will give us more of an indicator on that. He's also published Mystery School in Hyperspace, A Cultural History of DMT, Global Tribe, Technology, Spirituality, and Psytrance. He's also executive editor of Dance Cult, Journal of Electronic Dance Music Culture, and is currently a Marie Curie Senior Research Fellow in the Department of Music and Design Arts at the University of Huddersfield. If you want to find more from Graham, it's edgecentral.net, edgecentral, all one word, .net. Welcome, Graham.
It's great to be here, Nick. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
And it's a real honor to be back here at EGA, even as impersonal and distant as this is. So thanks to everyone, Ronnie, Ewan, and yourself, and everyone at EGA. So I guess I'll just get stuck right into it. It's not an easy place to start when you're talking about Terence McKenna, a subject who's been basically an obsession of mine for years, and especially the last 4 years, solid, writing a biography that will be published by MIT Press next year. So the work that I present draws on many years of research in this subject, but I want to start with a short quote. I don't think a single mind can encompass it within a single moment. This was McKenna on the subject of comprehending the mounting conditions of the planet. But I think the sentiment can be turned on McKenna himself in relation to the challenges of a singular effort to document his life and work, or let alone to give a single presentation about him. So this serves as something of a caveat. I have no omniscient vision over the life of McKenna, and no single mind could encompass the McKenna verse, or as my friend Kurt calls it, the Terence scene. But I will say that the effort benefits from the assistance of a great many. So anyway, McKenna, the psychedelic Renaissance man who sought to understand the role of psychedelics in evolution, consciousness, and time, among the most loved yet least understood figures in psychedelic folklore. I think what can be said safely about McKenna without much dispute is that he was and remains an enigmatic and perplexing figure, notoriously difficult to pin down, which is a problem consistent with a figure who once identified as an anarcho-cryptic, who would regularly recognize himself as half-baked, who was mercurial, a fugitive, a freak nomad, an edge runner. The perplexity isn't surprising. After all, he's been variously labeled as the Magellan of hyperspace, an Omega man, a holy fool, a psychedelic millenarian, a glib transhumanist, a brilliant narcissist, and so on and on. McKenna died relatively early from brain in the year 2000 at the age 53, but he continues to haunt the present. So what I want to address here is what I see as the role of psychopomp that McKenna came to play, both during his life and posthumously, as his virtual presence proliferated and as he became a virtual mentor for the multitudes. As he initiated the American and subsequently international underground into the tryptamine mysteries largely associated with DMT and psilocybin, McKenna effectively served as the role of trip sitter, if not in person, metaphorically, for multitudes. And it is a role he continues to play in the cybercultural afterlife. So this talk is going to address something of McKenna's biographical background. I'll talk about what I call the ALF event and the birth of a dimensionologist, a career that attempts to, where he attempted to comprehend the tryptaminal mysteries. I'll explore his emergent career as, America's shaman and more international focused mystic and chief bard to the underground. And finally, I'll address his posthumous career as a cyberdelic avatar and virtual psychopomp, as mediated in music and art, including AI art such as this work that you're looking at now by Ken Adams, and there will be various other examples of Ken Adams' AI art efforts as well as others. And partly because this is, I imagine, chiefly an Australian audience at this point, I'll also address McKenna's appearance at the epic Beyond the Brain party in Byron Bay in '97, as well as the soon-to-be released documentary film on this event. I'll address that. So the content that I'll draw on is from a biography I'm chronicling on the life and works and legacy of this enigmatic Rapatista. The project relied on interviewing and extensive research of public and private research archival material. I've communicated with well over 70 people, including family members and close friends and colleagues. I've accessed primary sources, including dozens of letters, manuscripts, and journal. I've surveyed a vast archive of publications, along with press articles, interviews, and research publications about McKenna, as well as documentary and other film sources. And not least, I've studied countless hours of spoken word recordings and all their transcriptions, his raps, which is and continue to be his chief and unique mode of communication, an art form I sometimes call his rapatismo. This kind of work has relied on the support and assistance of dozens of people. It couldn't have happened without the initial support of McKenna's friend, Rick Watson, and also Dennis McKenna, his brother, who has donated primary materials to the Purdue University archives, where I've enjoyed great support from archivist Stephanie Schmitz. I'd like to acknowledge other folks also, including Kat Harrison, his ex-wife, and kids, Ken and Clea, who've also been of great help, as has McKenna's girlfriend, Christy Silness, as has also archivist and fellow McKenna biographer, Kevin Whitesides, and there's a whole bunch of other people that I don't have time to mention now, but I certainly will too in the acknowledgements of my book. Other content I'll draw upon is from my previous book, Mystery School in Hyperspace, which is Modern Cultural History of DMT. In part, this book addressed McKenna's, in fact, both the brothers' role in transmitting DMT's grail-like status in modern culture. It was a secret that compelled the desperate William Burroughs to trek the Amazon in the early 50s, originally chasing Yahe and later injecting a crude DMT synthesis he called Prestonia, unleashing a nightmare in Tangier in 1961. Through Burroughs, it attracted the interest of Leary and his Harvard colleagues, who concluded that the compound was more transcendental trigger than nightmare hallucinogen. Soon after, DMT became the metaphysical reality pill of bold chemist Nick Sand. And from the mid-60s, it astonished the brothers McKenna, for whom the molecule was a key that unlocked consciousness itself. And through the 70s and 80s, DMT remained an obscure molecule. The fast-acting and dramatic effect on perception commanded reverence among small cohorts through the 80s and 90s. Aided by the availability of new botanical sources, extraction techniques, improved methods of use, the advent of the net, and direct-to-audience promotional methods, McKenna packed the pipe of knowledge and sent it around. If McKenna became a virtual psychopomp in anxious times, we need to better understand what this means. In Jungian psychology, the psychopomp is a mediator between the unconscious and conscious realms. It is a function that has been often considered that of the shaman, poets, great artists. Among McKenna's unique attributes was his abilities as a compelling mediator of his own unconscious, and beyond that, of the collective. He actually very early on hinted at his own role when writing in The Invisible Landscape, was co-authored with his brother. The shaman is able to act as an intermediary between the society and the supernatural, or to put it in Jungian terms, he is an intermediary to the collective unconscious. McKenna demonstrated such ability in his marvelous command of language and his remarkable capacity for retrieving and synthesizing information. This capacity was perhaps best apparent in the time wave, which I won't address much in this talk, other than to say that the time wave can be regarded as a mythopoetic expression of the unconscious, both McKenna's and that of the collective. So just some biographical background that I go to in much more detail in the book. Terence migrated from his hometown. He was born in 1946 in Pioneer in Colorado, and desired to escape, and eventually did move into California in 1963. Went to a couple of high schools in California, and eventually ended up in Freak Central in time and place, and that is Berkeley in the late 60s, 65, when he entered the experimental college at UC Berkeley. And he was in that experimental college between 65 and 67. And at the start of autumn 65, a large rooming house was leased by McKenna on the corner of Telegraph Avenue and Russell Street. There, he would sublet rooms to fellow students over the next 2 years. And he occupied the corner room, the master bedroom, which you can see there in this older photo on the left, which was taken many years before 65, but it's more or less intact. You can see another, and when he moved into 65, that shed or whatever that is at the front there was not there. And you see another more recent photo on the right, with the same house on the left, around about that time. This was in a very popular area of Telegraph Avenue. It was diagonally opposite a jazz club that then became acid rock club called Jabberwock, which was diagonally opposite that place. And so many events happened in this room and in this house, in this rooming house, that he sublet for to fellow students for a couple of years. And there was even a case where he actually moved out in the second year, but maintained control of the lease. Well, let me tell you about one story of one thing that happened in that room. It was a cold, damp evening on Telegraph Avenue, Berkeley, February 66, when a strange young man in a little black suit buttoned up to the throat mounted the steps and rapped on the door of 2894. A tall, wiry freak bade him entry, held by his host as his great inspiration. The guest is recalled as being always the one to get there first, whatever it was, to do it, to reject it, and to be absolutely contemptuous of it by the time anybody else even arrived at the scene of the crime. On this occasion, the guest had arrived with a little glass pipe and stuff that looked like orange mothballs. Something that might interest you, Rick Watson said. How long does it last? 10 minutes. To which Terence McKenna responded, let the good times roll. Settling in to take hits from a mothball, McKenna was soon transported into another dimension.
I mean, I sank to the floor. I couldn't move, and this diastolic hallucination of tumbling forward into these fractal geometric spaces made of light. And then I found myself in the sort of auric equivalent of the Pope's private chapel. And there were insect elf machines proffering strange little tablets with strange writing on them. And I was aghast, completely appalled, because the transition had been a matter of seconds. And my entire expectation of the nature of the world was just being shredded in front of me. I've never actually gotten over it. You know, it all went on. I mean, they were speaking in some kind of, there were these self-transforming machine creatures were speaking in some kind of colored language, which condensed into these rotating machines that were like Fabergé eggs, but crafted out of luminescent superconducting ceramics and liquid crystal gels, and all this stuff was just so weird and so alien and so un-Englishable.
From his early Berkeley phase, McKenna was driven by an independent course of study that would preoccupy him for his remaining days. Remembering his pal's epiphany on that night in February 66, Rick Watson recalls how Terence, he said, announced that he would devote his life to uncovering its origins and meaning. From that moment on, goofy footing the waves that broke out of the higher dimensions, McKenna comported himself as a dimension surfer, committed to comprehending and articulating the mechanics, aesthetics, and phenomenology of hyperspace. He became, in other words, a surfer of the surreal and a medium of the impossible. McKenna sought traces of the DMT flash in psychology, esoteric traditions, philosophy, art history, architecture, ethnography. He searched in vain for it in Jung. The dominant motif, he said, is a flood of visual imagery that, try as one might, one cannot recognize as the contents of either the personal or the collective unconsciousness. In the state of peak intoxication from these plant sources, what he found instead was a world of ideas, visual images, and noetic insights that really could not be co-mapped on any tradition, even the esoteric tradition. He pursued it in the art world, likewise without initial success.
To a place that Verrocchio never saw, Michelangelo didn't anticipate it, Yeats didn't know, Blake hadn't a clue, Melville wasn't briefed, and yet there it is, you know? To a place that
there was no wrinkle of it, not an atom of the presence of this thing in the carpets of Central Asia, in the visions of an Arcimboldo or a Fra Angelico or a Bosch. If art is a probing of the unknown, then McKenna later inquired why. Then McKenna later inquired, do painters from early Renaissance to abstract expressionists give no hint? We've had Beccafumi, Pollock, Piero della Francesca, but nobody got near this, not even the surrealists. Yet here's this experience that leaves you absolutely quaking. It's like an aesthetic orgasm, a Niagara of beauty, but alien beauty. That other times it appeared to possess the qualities of an outrageous jest.
It had the ambiguity of a pun, a kind of zany, impossible, improbable, hysterical revelation of the joke, the self-contradiction, the provisional nature of it all, that it really is a Marx Brothers movie in some sense.
And yet it could not be pinned down as anything of the kind. Pushed to describe this hallucinatory other space, beautiful, realistic, and yet utterly bizarre, it was thought to be like an Arabian maelstrom of color and form, in which one sometimes senses the Sistine Chapel, the Kaaba, and Monarch. A hyperdimensional infundibulum, he said. Even so, the student of art history was astonished that human history and art reflect so little of it. While finding its traces largely absent in art, clues were uncovered in Finnegan's Wake An effort was mounted to mine the seams of the work, loved not only for Joyce's depth of humor, but because it celebrated complexity and the human journey, he said, without judgment from its author. In the work, Joyce seems to have come closest among authors to pushing the entire contents of the universe down into about 14 cubic inches. The Russian-American novelist Nabokov was also evocative, as apparent in The Gift and Ada, among other works. Nabokov was seen to possess a remarkable capacity to convey unseen realms, the potostoronos, or the other world. There was also great sympathies for Fellini, as McKenna saw his DMT experience in Fellini's films, notably Amarcord, had a common undercurrent in The Circus, with all of its kinky shadowiness. Scenes in Violetta degli Spiriti are said to have been drenched with a tryptamine kind of consciousness. If traces of the DMT trance were evident in cultural form, they appear to have been located less in high expressions than in lower erotic and grotesque form. By the late 80s, McKenna hits upon the archetype of the circus that he feels rules the DMT experience. By the late 80s, speaking at Esalen, McKenna boils the circus down to a well-lit central area filled with chaotic activity, a domed space. Of notable appearance in this space are clowns recognizable as none other than what he called the self-transforming machine elves, who compete to gain one's attention, while 15 misshapen figures with big noses and rubber shoes may emerge from a tiny car and dance around as is standard to the clown archetype. A weirdly erotic component is undeniable. Working with an early childhood circus memory, McKenna recalls gazing on high to witness a female acrobat in a tiny spangled costume, suspended only by her teeth. I got it, he discloses, death and eros. He was aged just 3 or 4. The entire spectacle triggered a kinky undercurrent from the underside of youth. With the circus, McKenna found a perfect metaphor for DMT, a metaphor fused with boyhood memories of Cherry Days Festival, celebrated in Pioneer on the 4th of July.
And then when you think about the concept of the circus generally, you realize it's a perfect metaphor for DMT, because I grew up in a small town in Colorado where every 1st of July, the carnival would come to town. And we were told we couldn't stay out after 9:30 at night playing when the carnival was in town, because these carny people, they were just a different stripe, you know. Some of them probably drank heavy. They were of racially questionable origins and so forth. And they brought immense excitement to this little town, unpacked their wonders, built their Ferris wheels and rides, bilked all the rubes of their cash, and packed it all up and went away. And of course, every kid worth his salt wants to run off with the circus.
As such memories are retrieved to apprehend the carnivalesque world to which McKenna returned with such frequency, we gain some insight on the inner desire to run away with the hyperdimensional circus. Over the quest and the course of his early questing, the value of McKenna's elfish interludes in the DMT space were frequently located in the realm of the mysteries, recognizable through an engagement with traditions of the East and West, such as Vedanta, Neoplatonism, Gnosticism, and alchemy. When McKenna eventually traveled overseas in the late 60s, Jerusalem, Seychelles, India, Indonesia. He carried the baggage of a Neoplatonist who imagined the DMT experience to be the shortest and most powerful route to understanding the perennial experience of the One. And in his unpublished manuscript titled Crypto Rap, Meta-Electrical Speculations on Culture, a title that he later abandoned as pretentious dog shit, the DMT event is celebrated as the most contemporary, numinous, and productive in humanity's quest to uncover the mystery. This approach underwent modification through his attention to shamanism. Although traditional studies of shamanism and religion, for example, coming via Mircea Eliade, were found wanting. By 69, McKenna was living in Bodhanath, Nepal, stating that Central Asian Tibetan shamanism had created astronauts of inner space who had good recon in this area. He later claimed he'd been drawn to the area to locate the essence of the DMT vision. In Nepal, he pursued his interest in the Tibetan tankas with their staggering depictions of the Dharmaphalas. But while traces were possible in the artistic conception of the old pantheon, he decided ultimately that there too it was inaccessible. It was the shamanism of the Amazon that would most pique his interest. It was to La Chorrera in the Colombian Amazon, where McKenna trekked with his brother and friends in 71 in search of the native source of DMT, which was as much a search for the philosopher's stone. They instead found the magic in the form of the mushroom and an abundance of psilocybe cubensis. So this expedition and its experiment is the chief subject of his memoir, True Hallucinations. It would come to hold special significance for Terence, who was in that time all at once a mourner. They'd recently lost their mother, an exile, and a fugitive. It was the mushroom spores from the region that the brothers eventually cultivated in Berkeley a few years later, discovering a method that was to become a popular means of domestic cultivation. Now, I'm not going to address La Chorrera much in this talk. Suffice to say that it was a momentous juncture for both brothers. But I will point out that in the case of psilocybin and DMT, the objective was to disseminate knowledge about tryptamine cultivation, sourcing, and techniques of use so that his audience could seize control of the means of perception and become authors of their own experience. As Terence would inform his audience, the very grail that had compelled the brothers to trek to the Amazon could be accessed in their own backyards.
And what makes me wild about this is we're not talking about something that you have to go 500 miles up a jungle river and live with primitive people and study techniques for 30 years. We're talking about something which, if I had a pipe loaded with it in my hand, each one of you would be 30 seconds away from what I'm talking about.
So by virtue of possessing a set of lungs, the secret was only seconds away.
And
just to continue with the background on Terence's biography, he was married to Kathleen Harrison for 16 years. And they were divorced in 92. He met Kat Harrison in Jerusalem in 67, 68. They married in 75. Kat was his muse and co-heroic doser. She was and remains an experimentalist, notably with the mushrooms. I relate their story, including from Kat's point of view in the book, but hopefully we'll hear more from Kat as she potentially, hopefully, writes her memoir, and through the stories that she produces in the future. It's just a few select moments in Terence's life as a mysteries initiate. In 1977, he had his first known media appearance, where he regarded himself as a graduate of shamanic studies on New Dimensions Radio with Michael Toms. In 1982, he had his first recorded Esalen appearance, would subsequently appear there, or at least separate talks there on more than 100 occasions. By 1984, his True Hallucinations project publishes a talking book. He was referred to as a scholar and a wizard in the first edition of High Frontiers. By 1988, he was emceeing for Albert Hoffman, the Albert Hoffman Foundation tribute in LA. By this stage, he was becoming the eminent gris of cognitive liberty. And at least one journalist has referred to Terence as America's shaman. McKenna behaved like a mystery adept who not only sought to understand the transformative rite of passage he had known, but desired for others to know about and experience the center of the mystery too. Much like a convert, he sought to convey and share the esoteric booty, at first with friends, ultimately with the public, and today he shares it with a global audience via YouTube.
And you feel like a child, and you are playing with colored balls. You have become the aeon. So this happened to me 20 seconds after I did this drug on this day in 1965. And I was appalled. I mean, I thought that I had my ontological categories intact and I had taken LSD and just it was all going forward. And this thing came upon me like a bolt from the blue. And I came down and I said it many times while I was coming down, I cannot believe it. This is impossible. This is completely impossible because it was not, that I was kneeling at the feet of some rishi or roshi or geshe or one of those guys. It was not that there was a declension of gnosis. It was that, friends, right here and now, one quanta away, there is raging a universe of active intelligence that is transhuman, hyperdimensional, and extremely alien.
Throughout the 80s and 90s, from retreats at Esalen to New York nightclubs, McKenna gave many lectures, workshops, and interviews about his DMT experience, performances in which he transmitted knowledge on sourcing techniques and phenomenology. In my opinion, there was no rap that superseded, in terms of quality and content, his 1988 CIIS workshop, Ethnobotany of Shamanism. Like a masterclass in comparative psychedelics, this lecture offered about as comprehensive a phenomenology of DMT as one could ever likely experience. As a rapidismo tour de force, McKenna served as a kind of metaphysical sitter for the student novices signed up to his lecture. As it related to his class, even before hitting his advised 70 milligrams of DMT, i.e. a very strong dose, vaporized in a glass pipe, the atmosphere is reported to change. It is as though time speeds up. There is a backwash from the event about to happen. The trepidation is palpable. There are chills, tremoring, a knotted stomach, nausea, restlessness. And then you get the Q phenomenon, which is engineering circles, refers to vibration in a physical system. This preliminal atmosphere sets the stage for the breakthrough experience, captured here by transgalactic supergroup Spongle.
So you take, let us assume, a third toe, long and slow. You vaporize and you take it in and in and in, and there is a sound like the crumpling of a plastic bread wrapper or the crackling or the flame, and a tone, a and there is this, and there is this.
Story was earlier taken up on UK act Surveyor's album Dream Matrix Telemetry. This is McKenna's hour-long commentary on the phenomenology of DMT metabolism, where one is propelled through the chrysanthemum.
A kind of tunnel-like space, you seem to be catapulting forward. Through some kind of labyrinth of light, tubular, unfolding, colored, fluctuating space.
I earlier mentioned McKenna's mid-60s eureka moment, his off event. This and subsequent contact episodes from the era provided material for countless hours of storytelling, relating moments of contact and sustained relation with other dimensional entities. As McKenna's spirit familiars, the machine elves became native to the McKenna-esque hero's journey. The moment was immortalized by Spongle.
There is a cheer. The gnomes have learned a new way to say "ooh."
McKenna had long marveled about the bamboozlingly impossible presence gifted him by these singing elf machines, objects he journaled in 1971 as mechanized syntactical Fabergé eggs. Ever shifting and synesthetic, these gifts are true objects of wonder, their bearers competing for his attention.
Like jewels rippling basketballs, things come running forward, and what they are doing with this visible language that they use, they are making ears for you.
Through the 80s, a vast library of cultural signifiers was consulted to make sense of these outrageous entities, their astonishing gifts, and the space that they co-inhabit. Literary and film sources animated a canvas with insights from Plato, Joyce, John Dee, Wizard of Oz, among many other sources. The space into which he was propelled was mapped by reference to the merry-go-round, a la Finnegan's Wake. The room is actually going around, and in that space, one feels like a child. Though one has come out somewhere in eternity, he said in his first recorded Esalen speech. In the same rap, he explained how the entities making themselves known were reminiscent of a scene from The Wizard of Oz, where the Munchkins arrive with a death certificate for the Witch of the East.
I always think of the scene in The Wizard of Oz after the house knocks the witch down and she's in Munchkin land, and the head of the Munchkins comes with a scroll, and they all have very squeaky voices, and they sing a little song about, "You are absolutely and completely dead." And they're marching around her. So the Munchkins come, these hyperdimensional machine elf entities, and they bathe you in love, which is spelled L-U-V. It's a kind of, well, it's not erotic and it's not heartful, but it sure feels good. And what they are saying is, don't be alarmed, remember, and do what we are doing.
And McKenna does just that, faithfully repeating the story of his transdimensional gift bearers, including restating their entreaty to do what we are doing. For his remaining years, he followed his orders. By way of mediumship and emulation in rap after rap, the recursive story is recapitulated before larger and larger audiences. By the time of Alien Dreamtime, the 1993 performance recorded in San Francisco, it was so well rehearsed, the script could have been the basis for a pageant play.
And what they were doing was they were making objects come into existence by singing them into existence. Objects which look like Fabergé eggs from Mars, morphing themselves with Mandaean alphabetical structures. They looked like the concrescence of linguistic intentionality put through a kind of hyperdimensional transform into three-dimensional space. And these little machines offered themselves to me, and I realized when I looked at them that if I could bring just one of these little trinkets back, nothing would ever be quite the same again. And I wondered, where am I? And what is going on? And it occurred to me that these must be holographic viral projections from an autonomous continuum that was somehow intersecting my own. And then I thought, a more elegant explanation would be to take it at face value and realize that I had broken into an ecology of souls, and that somehow
I was getting a peep over the other side. Somehow I was finding out that thing that you cheerfully assume you can't find out. But it felt like I was finding out. And it felt, and then I can't remember what it felt like, because the little self-transforming types interrupted me and said, don't think about it. Don't think about who we are. Think about doing what we're doing. Do it. Do it now. Do it.
Terence became the emissary for the elves. I've said earlier that McKenna claimed he hadn't found much trace of the DMT space or its occupants in the depth psychology of Jung. Yet Jung remained an informing voice throughout McKenna's quest-like life. Indeed, as Jung's own quest throws up curious parallels. As part of the late stages of the alchemical opus, Jung had encountered in Greek mythology the enigmatic Kebiri, chthonic deities associated with Hephaestus, god of fire, smithing, forges, and volcanoes. In McKenna's views, as stated in Food of the Gods, these alchemical children were similar to the small helping spirits that the shaman calls to his aid. However, while Jung saw the Kebiri as autonomous portions of the psyche that have temporarily escaped from the control of the ego, McKenna found little satisfaction in such explanation. Excavating deeper layers in the 70s, he cribbed from Jacques Vallée, recognizing his elven aliens as absurd anomalies, pulling the epistemological rug right out from underneath rationality, scientific truth, and official paradigmatic versions of reality, not unlike the metalogic of sources and other UFOs. While couching the machine elves as confounding symbols fomenting up out of the planetary overmind, the appraisal morphed through the 80s. By that decade's end, McKenna's entities bore resemblance to fairies, and notably the Gaelic Shay. When writing the introduction to the reprint of Evans Wentz's The Fairy Faith in Celtic Countries, McKenna received the revelation that the fairy faith, as he wrote, is a belief in an invisible co-present dimension in which dwell the transformed souls of the ancient dead, able to interact with humans who wander into the lonely, enchanted landscapes that seem partial doorways between the fairy world and our own. One day spent in the land of Shay is sufficient, he wrote, for the great wheel of many centuries to turn in the ordinary world. The understated implication is that the dead were making themselves known to McKenna in DMT space, and that their elven form was an expression of his Irish roots. In one of his best summations of the elf lore, he entertains the possibility that they are spirits of the ancestors. There was, he said in his rap, History Ends in Green, a hair-raising quality to contacting these things. The co-presence of the very familiar with the freakishly bizarre created a distinct form of cognitive dissonance. While we may wonder if he then regarded smoking DMT as a molecular seance, and that the elves were, by implication, his transcended relatives, I've seen no evidence that he associated his elves with specific ancestors of his own. However you carve it, smoking DMT enabled McKenna access to the gnosis of elves. That is, that they are underground craftsmen. With this elf fairy-led return to his Irish Catholic roots, we approach the Gnostic kernel of McKenna's quest The true artifice of elves, their secret, is that they fabricate language. This is why said in Irish mythology, if you can get elves on your side, you can make great poetry, because they are the keepers of linguistic artifice. And keeping elves on your side makes you into a master poet.
My aliens seem very alien. And everybody else's aliens seem incredible. They're just like the people next door. You know, they work for the government out at the base and so forth and so on. My aliens are not like that. They are as alien as aliens can be and still show up on your screen as an experience at all. They are not made of matter. They are made, so far as I can tell, in my humble opinion, they are made of grammar. Excuse me? Yes, they're made of grammar. They are made out of language. They are living language.
As the stand-up philosopher and raving rapatista, I guess you'd like to use that phrase. In making small mouth noises that illuminated insight on time and consciousness, distilled in never repeated bits, delivered as gifts to his audience. McKenna was wonderstruck by the synesthetic materiality of language. If the elves showed him that reality was woven from language, like a hyperspace apprentice, he was driven to make his audience see this revelation. Do what we are doing became do what I am doing. Whomever or whatever the elves were, these spirit familiars were the regulars of a mythopoetic cheer squad whose insistent appearances sealed his own stature as a master poet. And not only was McKenna making these gestures in words, but he was doing so in practice. Over the decades, the Pied Piper passed the pipe around to countless willing recipients, usually extracting from Psychotria Brutus. He would share and sell DMT to a great many. There are many stories and legends surrounding these gestures. Stories, for instance, about the impact of a bag of DMT known as the pink packet that fueled the psychedelic trance movement. I won't go into that here because I've written about that, spoken about that extensively elsewhere. As for singular gestures of this kind of initiation experiences, one such occasion is seared into the memory of aromatic oil and olfaction researcher John Steele, who's one of the many folks I've communicated with. It was at the Ojai Foundation in California on the 24th of May, 1987. A small group were introduced to DMT in a small hillside yurt. Wearing a woolen Peruvian poncho, McKenna exuded a focused shamanic presence, said Steele. One by one, each novice lay down in the center of the circle as Terence fired up the pipe. He looked after each one of us while we journeyed, said Steele. He invited each person to share their experience with the group as soon as it was over. For Steele, this trans-dimensional episode was, he said, a singular act of spiritual generosity. That was replicated for a great many grateful initiates over the years. It might be stated that, though surely acts of kindness, such gestures were less instances of altruism than behavior consistent with a drive to find those whose contact experiences bore favorable comparison to McKenna's own. One such fellow traveler was visionary painter Robert Venosa, who thanked McKenna for the rebirthing of his superconscious following their first meeting in '93, after which they became close friends. Both Venosa and his partner Martina Hoffman encountered ayahuasca care of McKenna, an episode that influenced Venosa's ayahuasca dream. And of course, this points up another topic that I won't be addressing here, that he was also brewing up ayahuasca, which at one stage he was calling ayahuasca. Over the years, during his own life and posthumously, McKenna became something of a freak oracle. During his life, his oracular role can be observed in the raps, notably in the Q&A sessions that were often longer than the scheduled talks. In this way, he has performed for many a similar function that the mushroom performed for him, as a kind of non-judgmental informing voice. That the appearance of McKenna's voice coincided with the advent of the internet and the development of digital sampling technology, which was deployed to amplify, filter, and enhance his voice, is not insignificant. And I'll return to this theme when discussing McKenna as a meta trip sitter. The way McKenna spoke to the new generation was most explicit in the new acid house rave culture, the turn of the 90s. Here, the raver united with raves. There were some key moments, such as his appearances at Evolution and Megatripolis, the release of the single Re-Evolution with the Shaman, which reached number 18 on the UK singles chart. And the events I've already mentioned, the 93 San Francisco event, Alien Dreamtime, the brainchild of Ken Adams, who would become a significant conduit for McKenna's entrance into the rave scene. By 93, McKenna was being identified as the rave generation's spiritual voice, according to Trip magazine. In 97, during his short Australian tour, McKenna made an appearance at Beyond the Brain at Byron Bay's epicenter. Some listening to this will have been there. It was an extraordinary event. It was, as someone had said, hailed as the absolute pinnacle of visionary psychedelic trance culture events in Australia. Seated cross-legged on a mushroom dais before 1,000 people, McKenna delivered one of the most spellbinding examples of his rap. During the performance, he began delivering his now renowned amazing dope tale. He was visibly impressed by the familiar aroma drifting up from the crowd, which must have been a first for him, as he was noticeably impressed. As some of the audience had been smoking DMT blends, versions of which were later named Changa, McKenna was performing like a real-time on-stage trip sitter and psychopomp. McKenna died within about 3 years of that performance. But while he'd left the building, his voice grew prolific in psychedelic electronica, and has done over the last 3 decades. So much so that he is likely the most sampled individual in the history of electronic music. His proliferation is evident on SoundCloud, which features possibly thousands of shared music productions tagging McKenna. His voice is so frequently transmitted, filtered, distorted, that his mind has become iconic for going out of one's mind. In discussions about the McKenna-esque, I've spoken elsewhere about how McKenna became a medium of the unspeakable, by which I mean that there are not only sonic productions that sample McKenna with the desire to transmit the content of his ideas and visions, but there are productions on which his voice is manipulated to aid psychedelic voyagers in their navigation of transcendent states, whether in public or private space. So as I move closer towards the conclusion, it is these audio artifacts and his role as a sonic psychopomp that I turn. Psytrance was the sound that most frequently carried McKenna's voice into the new millennium. There are countless examples, and there's even an album titled Significant Alpha Proclivity. tracks are designed as sonic billboards for McKenna's visions of transdimensional metamorphosis, while at the same time providing the soundscape for states of personal transcendence in psychedelic states. Here's a very good example.
Could you turn up the volume on that one, Graham, if possible?
We are space. We are dimension. We are actually dimension. Into our own imagination. For civilization spread throughout space. Our future is a mystery. Yes, is to live the imagination.
The familiar voice is sampled to declare the quality of the transcendent conditions desired.
It's a strong trip.
Here, the posthumous sitter further clarifies the desirable conditions, taking note that these are typically the only words sampled on tracks that are over 8 minutes long.
Is singing in the rainforest, naked, stone, and exalted.
Some artists appear cognizant of McKenna's lifelong mythopoetic project, in which his philosophy of time, what he called the time wave, offers an unconscious language for the deconditioning of cultural programming. This sort of understanding is well represented in this collaboration, Mindzik, on their track SARP.
History, and history, and science gives us the Big Bang. I give you the big surprise.
Other times, the voice amounts to indistinct chatter, and not unlike audio-marked indistinct chatter in movie subtitle tracks. But here, the indistinct chatter is distinctly McKenna, a recognizable voice, even though the meaning may be occulted. But sometimes the distinctly indistinct voice is used to distinct effect.
The two have done sometimes substance, a half hour after you do this stuff. Nevertheless, the experience itself is absolutely correct. I'm challenging because there are these entities in there, and this is here I speak to you. Here is presence. Almost this is kind of a mondo of pharmacological approaches to the mystery, and DMT as you rise the bullseye. I mean, 30 seconds.
if there's more audio on that one, Graham, not sure that we can hear it. Looks like we're meant to be hearing Captain Hook and Liquid Soul. I imagine it goes something like this. Sorry, we couldn't hear any of the audio there, Graham.
Couldn't hear the audio. Well, that really does suck. I can tell you that it was worth it.
Yeah, I could tell by the crowd's reaction. But if there might be an audio ducker on Zoom, but don't worry too much about it now because yeah, I imagine we haven't got too much more to go. But that sometimes kills that audio. Sorry, everyone.
Can you tell me, Nick, was that the only audio that was missing?
The other ones were all right. Some of them were a bit low, but most of them were fine. I think
Okay.
anyone in the chat want to drop that? Yeah, most of them we could hear pretty clearly. You can tell that they're samples that. Well, I'll ask you about that when we get to Q&A. But I think it's expected when things are 30 years old, probably recorded on older technology.
Yeah, well, if anyone wants to check out that YouTube video of that YouTube Sci-Fi Festival from 2018, I highly recommend it. Sorry about that, but I'm almost done now. There's no more audio, I think. So just to round off, throughout his life, McKenna behaved like a visitor from elsewhere. He had powers of perception that might be like those possessed by an alien anthropologist. I've mentioned his visit to Australia in '97 at the wrap at Beyond the Brain, while a visitor at the time performed like a real-time trip sitter for the audience at Byron Bay's epicenter. Over the next decades, posthumously, McKenna would approximate his role for countless psychonauts, from artists sampling his lexicon to dance floor occupants in altered reveries animated by his amplified sound bites, to folks at home streaming his thoughts now available in the catacombs of the net. I'm pleased to say that all such elements will converge in the near future with the release of the film Beyond the Brain with Terence McKenna, produced by Paul Chambers, with photography by Jenny Lusk. I've recently had the privilege of viewing the near final version of this documentary over the last year or more, from raw footage that has sat in limbo for more than 25 years. Chambers painstakingly crafted a film in which never before footage of McKenna's performance provides the framing for the visual representation of the 3-day Beyond the Brain event. Not only capturing one of McKenna's most spellbinding performances, this remarkable film opens a window on a lost Aussie visionary art and music scene. Paul plans to launch this film in conjunction with his article that he's publishing in this November's issue of Dance Cult, the Journal of Electronic Dance Music Culture that I am executive editor at, and I'm also co-editing a special issue this year coming out in mid-November, co-editing with Trace Riddell on the theme of psychedelica and electronica. So Paul's material and launch of this film will be made available finally after 25, like a quarter of a century of this footage laying in limbo. For me, this soon to be released film has several significance. From the point of view of a biography, it's among the lost gems of McKenna's entire history of spoken word performances. But specifically, the film evokes McKenna's role as a psychedelic psychopomp right into the present. It made sense that McKenna, a figure who had never before set foot on the continent, was to be afforded such a headlining gesture, headlining stature, to be a focal point for the event, a circumstance faithfully represented by Paul Chambers. The freak alien, the absolute other, is a symbol through which boundaries are dissolved and self-identity is projected. As an outsider to the local scene whose own origins were seemingly as interdimensional and intergalactic as American, McKenna served as the ideal conduit for the expression of local identity, a freak who served as a vehicle through whom the journey of the self from individuals to entire scenes can be expressed. A meta-trip sitter then and now. And thanks for joining me. And that's it from me. Appreciate your company.
Thank you very much, Graham. Do stick around because we're going to do a couple of questions. And thank you. There have been a few questions that have been coming through in the chat, so please do keep them coming through. So we'll cross back to with Graham now. Do you want to end your slideshow for us, Graham? And we should be able to see you clearly. Let's have a look-see. Drop it out. Do some administration. This is the EGA Microdose Webcast. We are on episode 23, we think. It's a little rough guessing because we've had a few test broadcasts in there. We've had some longer broadcasts. Like, do you count that as one or multiple ones? Or we're not sure. And I'm just going to try and how can I stop it from afar? No screen. Graham, if you stop within Zoom, just hit stop screen share. It'll be around there somewhere. There we go, perfect. And jump back over. And oh, you're giant right now. I'll fix that up. Oh, hey, I'll still fix that up. Yeah, sorry, I got stuffed around a little bit by that internet dropout at the start. But I want to launch straight into a question that that I was wondering as I'm hearing all those wonderful samples. Well, first of all, is there some kind of library of those out there? I imagine it's fairly maybe protected and might be something that you have to have special access to. But do you know much about those recordings? Were they on old tapes? Did they come from a variety of sources? Just interested in those samples, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very good question, especially given that McKenna's oratory, his raps, or what I like to call his rapatismo, was his unique form of communication and knowledge transmission. He was more of a voice to be heard than text to be read, although, he obviously became an author of several books and a prolific writer. But he was more a prolific speaker from an early period, and that was recognized. So we have, some specific people to thank, especially at Esalen, where at least half of these recordings were made available we can thank specific individuals, such as a guy whose name I've forgotten, but he went as Dolphin Tapes. He specifically was dedicated to recording this material, much of which is now available on YouTube. There was a lot of other content that was recorded by the outfit Sound Photosynthesis. And so many of those recordings are also available. There's disputes about copyright issues that the intimacies I haven't gone into so much, but I do know that the family haven't been concerned too much about this material proliferating on the internet. And so today we have essentially a labyrinth, more links than a sausage factory. We've gone from a time when people were swapping tapes, much like, they were swapping Grateful Dead recordings in the early days in the 80s. Now, his rapatismo is prolific.
If you do have questions for Graham, drop them into the YouTube chat. Second question. Somebody wanted to know in the chat if you would like to say something about Rupert Sheldrake. Do you know of the Schumacher College? And those were both from Alex in the YouTube chat.
Well, what I do know about Rupert is that he's one of the many people that I've chatted with, and so he was very grateful for the time that he's given to this project, and he was very concerned about getting things right. One of his closest, intellectual compadres. They met in '82, I think, in Sheldrake's first visit to the US when he was promoting his first book, I believe, and had met him at the same time as he met Ralph Abraham, and they of course became the trialogue, and that intellectual threesome was a very prolific cacophony of small mouth noises that led to them doing these events called trialogues for about 10 years, up until McKenna's death. They met pretty much every year, and I think that there were maybe potentially 10 trialogues in different locations. They started off in private and were later became key Esalen events. And this was after about 10 years of McKenna and Abraham, through their friendship, having essentially dialogue. So when Sheldrake came along, he just added a third voice to that. They became a trinity. And I believe that when McKenna left the building, those guys tried to keep the fires burning, and so, like an old rock band, they tried to find a new frontman, and I think they went through several attempts to find a new frontman, but they couldn't reclaim the glory, so they packed it in. I do mention provide a lot on Sheldrake's story in the book.
Excellent. Just while we're on the book, do you have an estimate on when you think it'll be ready, or wait and see? Maybe head to edgecentral.net, and do you have a newsletter there that people can subscribe to for updates?
Yeah, there is a way to subscribe for updates on edgecentral.net. Well, it's a good question, because the manuscript has not yet been submitted, but in fact, I plan to submit the first version of the manuscript this week. So now that I've actually said that in public, I guess I should come through with it. But we're hopeful to see it next year. Within a year from now, I would anticipate.
Do you think you'll do a tour for it or anything like that? Is that your cheese and bologna? I don't really know what. Is it your meat and veg?
Yeah, there's nothing planned at this point, because we haven't really pinned down the sort of schedule. But I expect I'll be talking about it at a few places next year for sure.
Fantastic.
There's nothing set at this point.
Yes, nothing set. I think that's the clear message, but do subscribe over there for updates, and you can subscribe to EGN. If we hear from Graham, then that will also be information that we can transmit to you. Multiple places to transmit information. Alex, in the chat section, if you had part 2 of your question, if you could drop that in, that would be super helpful, because I was going to ask it and I was like, no, that's not the end of a sentence. I have another question here. I love, so this person said, I love how McKenna referenced somewhat challenging literature, especially James Joyce. Do we know if there are any recordings of him reading Finnegan's Wake? It would sound incredible if there were, from a commenter.
There are recordings of him actually speaking, reciting long pages of lines from Finnegan's Wake, in fact. And so I think this was, obviously a preoccupation of his in private for many years, and then in public. And he did give an amazing rap on Joyce at Esalen, I believe. And it really, you couldn't really tell a difference between McKenna and a Joycean scholar. He also read Ulysses, and and absorbed this material during his studies and travels. And that particular Finnegan's Wake, which then inspired his name, son Finn, was his go-to novel, go-to source, which can't really be described as a novel. But for him, the spaces into which Joyce transported his readers was transdimensional. And McKenna was just searching for ways and means and memes and cultural artifacts to assist his search for the answers to this mysterious experience, or experiences that he had, and just one of many sort of cultural products in a lifelong quest. But I've selected in this talk just a few examples of some of the content and characters and figures in literature and in theory that inspired him. And my book does go into quite a bit of detail on the three kind of the triad of mentors that inspired him, especially during his Berkeley days and afterwards. There was, of course, Jung that I've mentioned, Mircea Eliade, and Marshall McLuhan. And there were these three figures that and their ideas are woven into McKenna's discourse, and really kind of help furnish the concept of the time wave that became his major sort of mythopoetic burden, and subject that I've not addressed here at all. But there is a chapter where I attempt to sort of embark on understanding the time wave, and it sort of points up the fact that this might be the first biography of McKenna, but it's certainly not the biography of McKenna, and won't be the last biography. I know that as a subject that, for example, my colleague in McKennaphilism, if you like, Kevin Whitesides, has been working on for years. And in fact, he and I are working on a biography, an anthology, co-editing an anthology also for MIT Press, that's coming up after the biography. So there's been a lot of work down in the minds by us sort of McKennaphilic elves scurrying around attempting to understand this Greek rapidismo.
And speaking of, the I don't know, elf territory. I mean, this. We're looking at a sample of the Voynich manuscript, or I think Voynich, but if somebody wants to pronounce it differently, that's also fine. We're up for multiple pronunciations on this webcast. Somebody's just asked about Terence's, if he ever came to a conclusion on the Voynich manuscript, and I haven't even heard him talking about it. So that's some homework for me for later.
Yeah, well, that might be some homework for me as well. I'm not too familiar what his conclusions on the Voynich manuscript were. I mean, we're talking about someone who's week by week, Terence drew on new material and wove through different interpretations of existing ideas and was exposed to new content, and like a magpie crafted his thoughts around specific key themes from constant access to new material. And so very difficult to pin down when if you look at his trajectory through any single year in the late 80s and early 90s, and look at his speaking engagements, where every week he's talking about something completely different. He was the master of the craft of entertaining his audience, because there was never one talk that was anything like the other talk. And but this also created something of a problem for him, because towards the end he had to embellish and recraft existing content. So he was constantly looking for ways to tell the same story in different ways, or retrieve new memories. And but at the same time, I can't say that I've accessed every single McKenna rap, because I'm not sure anyone has. And if they have, then I congratulate them, because it's really it would be quite a significant achievement. Maybe Peter Bergman might be the closest person to have done so, because he's responsible for creating a lot of hundreds of McKenna videos that he's crafted from existing content. But I guess even he couldn't say that he's been exposed to all this content. So I guess I'm meandering on in the fact that I can't answer that question.
I had a similar question for the I Ching, but if it's a similar answer, we'll just move on to the next one.
And so the question was?
Oh, the question was same question as before, about Terence's views, perspectives, where he came to in the end on the I Ching. But if it's...
Yeah, well, so I haven't really addressed the I Ching, because that's a whole other subject. It certainly relates to the time wave. But what I can say is that in 1971, he became enamored with the I Ching, and began throwing on a daily basis. And this is around the time that he first started hearing the mushroom voice, and it was the mushroom voice that was kind of like his inner guru that told him many things, including apparently gave him instructions on how to decode the I Ching. And the I Ching was essentially decoded as an ancient Taoist calendar. And he's also spoken about how he kind of traded his ideas about the I Ching, or the concept of a time wave that he sort of downloaded from mushroom space. So the I Ching, remains, prevalent in the background of McKenna's work, but I've purposefully not talked about the time wave and how that came about here, because that's a whole other subject. And but I do address that somewhat in the book.
On documenting Terence, do you know how much of McKenna's library was lost in the Esalen fire, and did this loss cause you or any others problems, and you especially for this upcoming book?
Yeah, that's a very good question. It's interesting because there were actually 3 fires in McKenna's life. The first 3 library fires. The first one was in 1970, when his materials, mostly books that he'd collected up until the age of 25, I think he was around that time, or more, were destroyed in the garage of his friend's mother's house during a brush fire in the Berkeley Hills. This was when he was traveling outside the US, and this was actually just I think the year after his hash import bust that went down in '69. Another subject I haven't talked about. So he went through some significant misfortunes at that time, because their mother also died around that point. But the second library fire was the one you mentioned, and that was 37 years later, about 7 years after he died, when about 3,000 to 4,000 books were destroyed in the Esalen repository on the coast there in Monterey, California. Was a significant loss. But I'll just say also there was a third fire that happened when Mike Kowinski, aka Schwann's house, burned down in Cape Town in 2019. And that's of interest because Mike was storing videotape as well. It was donated to him or gifted to him by Dennis, and also, more importantly, Terence's last hard drive that Mike was in possession of. Fortunately, that story goes, as we sort of, imagine the flames licking at Terence's legacy. Fortunately, according to Mike, before his house burned down, he gave a dodgy hard drive that material had been transferred to his tech specialist, and so that wasn't burned down last time I spoke, or wasn't destroyed. And the last time I spoke to Schwann, he indicated that material, which is on his hard drive, is also a lot of Terence's last materials mixed with Mike's own personal content. And so he hasn't resolved that yet, but I guess the silver-lined cloud is that content hasn't been totally destroyed. So the saga goes on. But to answer your question, yeah, that Esalen library fire was a major devastating loss, especially because we don't really know what happened. We don't really know what, more to the point, what was destroyed in that fire, because unfortunately Esalen hadn't categorized and recorded the list of the content that was destroyed. So it kind of remains a mystery, which is sort of emblematic of parents and a number of people who've suggested that, perhaps McKenna wouldn't have been too disturbed, and that the symbolism of impermanence and ephemerality that goes with the nature of destruction by fire may be a perfect sort of symbol of transition and transformation.
We're just about out of questions, Graham, but I've got one for you. Nothing to do with your work right now, but to do with what's going on with your visual. Have you got some kind of oil paint effect going on? It's a little wacky? Or is that just distortion?
I think we're talking about some sort of distortion because
wow.
And I'm happy to hear that I've got a wacky and
it's the perfect kind of distortion if it's unintentional. Because there's some strange like words have turned into nonsense symbols on your in the back there. I don't know if anyone else has noticed that, but that's a really nice unintentional little effect there.
I'm glad the earth is moving for you.
Is there anything else that you wanted to leave us with before we finish up tonight? Anything else that you might be working on, or any plugs that you might like to give?
No, just other than to just repeat that folks can go to my website edcentral.net and subscribe for any updates that I'll send over the next year or so, not only in relation to the release of this book, but to in any events that are associated with that, and in collaboration with Kevin Whitesides, we'll be talking about the more in the future about the next project, which is the anthology on Terence, which I'll leave as a surprise for now because we have a number of really exciting contributors, and that's a project down the line. So, I just want to thank you, Nick, and everyone at EGA for having me on. It's a real honor to be here, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Graham. Honored to have you here on the EGA webcast, number 23-ish in our Microdose webcast series. Thank you very much, Graham. And again, if you want to head to Graham's website, that's edgecentral.net is the place to go. Edge Central, EDDE Central, the word. Hopefully you know how to spell that one, but I'll get our admins again to drop that into the chat because it's much easier than trying to, maybe you were running away from the computer right then, and that's exactly when I said it, and there's no pen. There's definitely no pen nearby, and opening up another window is going to stuff up everything that's going on right now, and that's why we get our admin team to drop it in the chat. Also, make sure to head to the Entheogenesis website, entheogenesis.org. It's along the bottom. It's over there now. Where you can sign up for the newsletter, get regular updates from EGA. Next time we do a Microdose webcast, you'll get an update about that. And I've heard murmurings that there might be an event in December, on the first weekend of December. But they are only murmurings at this stage, so we'll wait and see until there's anything more solid to give you. In the meantime, the psychedelic world, especially here in Victoria, is more active than ever before, more diverse than ever before, and needs your contributions as the members of this diverse community and those who have supported psychedelic community, psychedelic culture for a long time. Make sure to get out there, get your voice heard, whether it's on social media, whether it's in some kind of inquiry in the future, whether it's to other organizations, join organizations, chat with organizations, engage with the psychedelic world out there. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you very much to everybody who has asked a question. Thank you very much to our admin team for all of their hard work behind the scenes. Again, entheogenesis.org, that's the place to go for all updates. And I think that's just about it for this evening. Let me just check if there was anything else. Oh, again, I'll just mention the resources on the website, entheogenesis.org / we'll get those admins to drop it in there. Again, I'll have to find it over here somewhere. EGA News / Happy Wattle Day. Here, I'll drop it in. Oh, yep, they're dropping in the fact sheets as well. That is the special Wattle Day announcement that should have all of the information in there. And I believe, if it's work for me. Hey, there we go. And this is the announcement with a reference guide to common wattles and identifying them. And also some how to grow acacia seeds there for those who would like to grow a native and wonderful plant, good name as well, and you know, get your thumbs a little green or a little dirty. Make sure to wash your hands afterwards though, and then before you put food in your mouth. You all know that though. Sorry, I've got young children. They don't know these things and they go and get themselves sick by highly avoidable situations. Also, on the YouTube channel, there are lots of videos, always more as well. That there is Microdose Webcast episode 12. Geez, when 23rd of February, that must have been at the start of last year. That was Dr. Liam Engel talking about acacia conservation. But if you have a look on our YouTube channel, you'll find heaps more on there as well. So thank you everyone for joining us, especially through mild technical errors earlier in the broadcast. We're definitely going to have to troubleshoot some of these things. Things get upgraded and then it's a whole new thing again. Dear. Thanks. Oh, I'm gone. So, have a good evening. I think there might even be some music playing or something. Oh, none of these. I'll press this button and that doesn't. See you later.